initiate a strike, shutting down shops, particularly around key arcades. The strike marks a renewed wave of frustration over high tariffs, heavy taxation on garments, rising rents, the burden of EFRIS, that's the new electronic fiscal receipting and invoicing system, and a perceived surge in competition from foreign, particularly Chinese retailers. Now, some traders have even called for the resignation of the URA Commissioner General, General Msungizi Rujoki. Several people have been arrested amid enforcement efforts, and a key meeting with the Prime Minister was abruptly adjourned when arrested traders were not released. Now, the strike has been polarizing because some business districts have actually stayed open whilst others remain shuttered. Now, to unpack what's going on, we're now joined by Ugandan lawyer and social activist Godwin Toko. Thanks very much indeed for joining us, Mr. Toko.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you too.
All right, so I wonder if you can start by describing maybe what the mood looks like in Kampala this morning. Are there areas still affected by a shutdown? What's the state of play today?
So the latest news is that there's been a resolution reached between the Prime Minister Nabanja, Robin Nabanja, who met the traders yesterday, and the traders have agreed to open up their shops temporarily as they hope that the government meets its side of the agreement they reached yesterday. So the mood is getting back to normal, but we just have to see how the day goes. Sometimes such promises are made, and then within a couple of days, they go back to where they were at the start. So this time, we just have to wait and see how it goes.
I know I mentioned a few things in the introduction there, but take us through what are the central grievances that these traders have, and why it's affecting their lives so much.
So the first one is the competition from the Chinese. Uganda has a virtually open investment policy that allows literally anyone to come and invest in Uganda. So you have the Chinese coming in here and investing so heavily in the textile sector, in construction sector, and they're selling all these household products. And that has, of course, affected so many Ugandans who were already engaged in that sector, in those different sectors. But the question then is that there's this feeling that in the government's desperation to attract foreign investment, they end up giving preferential treatment to the foreign investors at the expense of the local investors. So when the government brings an investor, many times when an investor gets here, they meet the president and they're given free land, they're given tax holidays, they're given all these, so many things. There are industrial parks set up in the country that are virtually run by the Chinese across the country. So yes, that was the first point of contention, why the government seems to be so much into giving these benefits to the foreign investors at the expense of the local investors. But now, investors came here and they started making, for instance, in the textile industry. When a factory makes all these clothings, it does not go around selling them. It needs the local people that have the shops to sell them. So the president literally got to a point where he was trying to put a ban on importation of clothing from outside Uganda. That was, of course, supposed to spur local investment by having these Ugandan traders then sell the clothes of those Chinese. But then the Ugandan traders were saying that they were getting a raw deal. They would get the clothes, say, from China or elsewhere at much cheaper prices and then make a profit. But if they got them from Uganda, the cost seemed high and that would eat into their profits. So that became a serious point of contention. Then you mentioned IFRIS. So for a long time, there was a bit of a gentleman's agreement, I could say, between the government and the traders in Uganda, that the government, while taxing the traders, did not go all the way. So there were so many loopholes that so many traders exploited. But now, if you put with IFRIS in place, the traders are going to be in a situation where the government looks at literally every sale they make, everything they do. I was in South Africa last year, and someone told me how there was once an arrangement to have payment of taxes for the transportation using cards. And the taxis fought back saying that that would have the government looking into whatever they were making in terms of profit, and then they could be heavily taxed. Now, I could relate those two. It is similar to that. So freeze is basically the government going to look at every single transaction and taxing the traders. And the traders have this other thing of saying, well, what does the government do for me? Which is a sentiment also held by so many Ugandans, that while the government is taking all these taxes, there's a lot of corruption, there's a lot of the roads are bad, so many things are not going right, and so they feel like they're getting a road deal if they pay all those taxes. So briefly, I could pack it like that, unless there's something specific. I don't want to go on and on.
All right, so let's look at IFRS. Are we suggesting that the traders don't want to pay any tax at all?
Not really. I think the traders want to pay taxes. Well, with freeze also comes other issues, because, like I said, it's literally the government looking into every single transaction. I've watched a video where the spokesperson of Kasita, which is the Kampala City Traders Association, was basically arguing about the right to privacy, and saying that even in business there should be right to privacy. The government should not look at every single thing I do, because the argument is that while I can pay taxes, I should pay taxes under the current arrangement. And it is true that so many loopholes do exist, but over time URA has worked, URA being the Uganda Revenue Authority, which is charged with collecting taxes in Uganda, has worked over time to ensure that many of these loopholes are filled in, and the tax revenue has been going up over the years. But now IFRIS, if it is implemented in the current form, and I understand why URA wants to implement it, because, well, there are those loopholes, but if it is implemented, it's going to be, it's just more than taxes. It's about looking into every single transaction. It's about getting perhaps more taxes, because there are also disagreements of the taxation. Sometimes the traders say, the government can, on the government side, can seem like I've sold, but in reality, I've made a supply to a person I deal with in the DRC, who takes these things on credit and then pays me after like 2 years or after a year. So while if freeze is implemented, it will be shown on the side of URA that these are sales. It will not be shown that these are sales on credit that can be paid for later. So there are those questions up and down. But yes, I don't think the traders don't want to pay taxes. I just think it's the way it's being implemented.
Last question on this IFRS thing. I believe that they're also concerned about the cost of the EFD devices, and maybe even the complexity of the system itself.
Yes, so there's that concern as well. One, the Uganda Revenue Authority, through the government, wants the traders to be the ones to meet the costs of purchasing the devices that will be used to implement IFRIS. And that has been a very, very serious point of contention. And then there's the part where a lot of Ugandan traders downtown, these are very, very successful traders by Ugandan standards. They reckon hundreds of thousands of dollars every year, but most of them are really not educated. In fact, the Ugandan system, the Ugandan outlook of business is such that the most successful people in business tend to be those who are least educated. So there are those questions of how will they manage IFRIS? And then, of course, URA answered and said, well, you have to employ someone. And then some of them are saying, no, I can't employ someone, because this for me is a very personal business. I run this at a very personal level. Yeah, so it's all those coming into play. There's that as well. Do we buy these, and when we buy them, who meets the costs? And when it malfunctions, who meets the repair costs? Isn't that an additional cost to my business? And if that is the cost for thousands of businesses in Uganda, how does that affect the businesses that I'm running? If I'm running, say, 100 businesses, and I have to buy these devices for all those businesses. Yes, so there's that too.
So I think you started by giving us what government has response has been. The Prime Minister has made some promises, and that's why things look normal today. But people have been arrested in the meantime. What's their fate at the moment?
Yes, so part of the negotiation is that those who are arrested be released. And the government has said it will look into that. Now, that means they may be released. That means they may not be released, but most likely they'll be released. I must just add, Peter, before I forget, that this is an election year in Uganda. We're having elections early next year. Already, right now, people are picking forms for presidential nominations. So maybe the timing of this is also important, because I think the traders see that they have an upper hand in bargaining right now. Our Ugandan elections tend to be a very, very hot contested subject. Even when the winner, quote unquote, is always known, because we've had the same president for 40 years now. But yes, he goes all the way to ensure that he is in good books of people around elections. So I think the traders may have that card on their end, that they can use that also, the fact that elections are fast approaching, to get those people released and to get so many gains on their end.
Has the government got a track record of keeping its promises?
No, not at all. Not at all. But then, like I said, the traders know that they can make some gains. So they have all these demands about the Chinese, about selling the Chinese products forcefully or under coercion. They have these demands about releasing the people. It is definite that it will be a case of give and take. They will make some successes and some tremendous gains, but I don't think that the government will keep all the promises, especially about IFRIs, because Uganda's debt burden has really spiked over the last few years. Uganda has several infrastructure projects that are being undertaken and there's no money for them. The government had aid cuts from the World Bank over the Anti-Homosexuality Act. So there is in terms, the fiscal policy has been quite tight. Like the government has been pushed to the wall. So the government is looking for all the monies it needs. And like I said, it's an election year. Elections are very, very costly in Uganda. I think it was in 2015 when there was a study that showed that the president of Uganda was spending more in that campaign, in a campaign, I think, compared to Trump, who was campaigning in the US for a particular period. So all these things bring in a lot of money, and that is going to push the government and the URI to the point where they need the money to fund these things and the projects and all that's going on, and to fill up the gaps and to pay the debts. And I don't think the traders are going to have IFRIs taken away forever. It may be taken away as a reprieve for the meantime, but I think eventually, most likely next year after the elections, it will be implemented.
So not all the traders shut down and sort of lined up with the striking traders. What does that tell us about the general feeling? Is this a divisive issue amongst the traders?
Yes, the Ugandan society is so stratified. We are always divided. So if traders in Kampala lay down their tools, you find that traders in some other part of the country, probably where the president comes from, or traders who are aligned to the president's ruling party within the city, will keep their shops open. So it's always hard to speak from a unified language. In fact, many times when one section of traders will close their shop, there will be another section of traders saying, "Oh, you shouldn't close your shops. You guys are playing politics. We can meet these people. We can have these things resolved amicably via negotiations." So that is again playing out. For instance, there was a report in the Daily Monitor, the leading independent newspaper in Uganda, saying that the shops in Western Uganda were open and business was moving on as normal at the peak of this traders strike in Kampala. Now, Western Uganda is where the president comes from, but that may not be the only reason. The other reasons may be that, well, they're not facing all the issues. Perhaps they're not facing the challenge with the Chinese. And I must say that what I forgot earlier to say is that one of the problems with the Chinese traders that the Ugandan traders see, the indigenous Ugandan traders see, is that the Chinese can literally do any business. So you could find you have shops in Kampala run by Chinese competing with Ugandan traders, selling maybe what, shoes, maybe apparel, like the most basic. I know so many countries protect their indigenous businesses and say this particular sector is not for foreign businesses. Tanzania did that recently, expelling Ugandans and Kenyans and saying they shouldn't engage in petty trade. But in Uganda, Chinese foreigners of any kind can engage in any form of trade, and that may be one of the reasons why the West are not striking, because it may not be as prevalent in the West as it is in Kampala.
So what we know across the continent, small traders and many that are in the informal part of the economy actually are the ones that create jobs and employment. Is that a similar scenario playing out in Uganda, that these small traders, if they carry more of a burden in terms of costs, that it could have an effect A on the economy and B on things like job creation?
Yes, if it is sustained for a long period of time. But I must also say that we've had traders striking several times. And many times it's for a couple of days, they get some gains and then they go back to business as usual. And I don't see this one playing out differently. Because of the election, they'll probably get many more gains, but then they'll go back to business as usual. And I think around this time next year, again, they'll close their shops and strike. The other thing, you see, when these traders strike, the government has this approach of the carrot and the stick. One of the sticks it normally uses is to work with the landlords. So the arcades in town, the malls, they are owned by rich business people, most of whom, given the setup of the Ugandan business scene, have inclination to the ruling party. Now, because of that, many times for them, they'll put out a statement and say, well, if you close your shops, we don't care. we need the rent at the end of the month. And for the smallest of traders, many times that compels them to open up their shops because they are looking at paying millions of shillings. That is very little if compared to rands. Our currency is much lower. But yes, millions of shillings at the end of the month, and they have to make that money. So when they get to that point where they are pushed, they will open up. So I don't think this will last for long. But if this had stayed on for long, let's say 2 months, that would have a very serious ripple effect on the economy because of employment, because of access to goods. And it's not just in Uganda. Uganda being where it is where a lot of people in South Sudan, it's the supply chain for a lot of people in South Sudan, the supply chain for a lot of people in the Central African Republic, and the supply chain for a lot of people, especially in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo and parts of Rwanda. So it would have a ripple effect on the region, even in terms of the supply chain. But like I said, I don't think this is going to be sustained or this is going to last for long. As you've already seen with the Prime Minister's promises, they've already agreed to open their shops and get back to work.
So, what do you think this moment says about the future of small scale trade, regulatory policy, and local business resilience in Uganda?
Yes. So I must say that Uganda operates a very informal sector. Uh, Most of these local traders, the way they operate is that they are very informal. That's why you're seeing they're having that kind of resistance against IFRIs. If it was like this big supermarkets, they wouldn't have had it. Now, what this says about the future of business of this kind of business in Uganda is that there's always going to be this contestation. The government wants to get as much taxes as it can, but to get those taxes, the government needs to formalize um, trade to move more to the formal bit and move away from the informal sector. Now, this is not new. That fight has been there for a while. The resistance has also been there for a while. What I see is that this is going to continue even much longer. The government is going to try to push the traders more to the other side of getting formal, but the traders are going to insist on being at this other end of not being formal because there are benefits there. Like I said, not all the taxes will be tracked. Some sales will not be tracked. So many loopholes will exist for them to exploit and then make more gains in terms of profits. So I see that playing out for a long period of time. That's why I said that around this time next year, probably there will be another strike. And there was a strike last year. There was a strike the year before. Sometimes they are multiple in a year. They can be as many as three in a year. So it is in many ways you could say business as usual in Uganda. It's the norm now. Many people are used to it. When the traders announce a strike, many people will stock up. Many upcountry traders will stock up, knowing that well, for the next 1 week or so, there'll be nothing. But they don't
Right.
stock up beyond a week because they know that it comes and goes.
Godwin, thank you so much for that comprehensive analysis of the situation on the ground. Let's hope they find each other, and as you say, perhaps we'll have another cycle of this in the near future. But thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, and thank you very much for having me. Have a good day.
Thank you. That's